This is Christian Gomez with the New American Magazine, and today we have with us Trevor Loudon, anti-communist author, researcher, and filmmaker. Trevor, thank you for joining us today.
Always a pleasure, Christian. Thanks for having me on.
So since the last time you've been here, now we have more horses in the race, so to speak. We have Elizabeth Warren has announced her run for the presidency. A U.S. Senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar, has announced her run for the presidency. And of course, the most popular dog in the race, so to speak, Bernie Sanders, has now thrown his name into the ring as well. What are your thoughts about all these candidates? Are they all socialist, or are there some moderates in there? What's going on with the Democratic presidential campaign? Is this a run to see who's the most progressive and most socialist candidate?
Well, I think Amy Klobuchar is trying to position herself in the middle to some degree with all the progressives running. But see, all three of those candidates you mentioned, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Amy Klobuchar, came out of the Democratic Socialists of America orbit. Now, Bernie's been involved with Democratic Socialists of America for 20 years, and the Socialist Party before that. He's as Marxist as you come. Elizabeth Warren's been involved with Democratic Socialists for many, many years. Very great. She was honored a couple of years ago at the Midwest Academy, which is the Saul Alinsky training school run by Democratic Socialists of America out of Chicago. And she worked very closely on her consumer protection agency with a woman called Heather Booth, whose husband was a DSA member, and she is a longtime associate of DSA, and Elizabeth Warren has collaborated extensively with that person. So she's out of the socialist movement too. But Amy Klobuchar comes out of the Paul Wellstone movement in Minnesota. Now, Wellstone was a charismatic progressive or socialist senator. He died in a plane crash, I think it was about 2002. But he was actively supported by Democratic Socialists of America. He held meetings with them. He mentored their student group. They campaigned for him. They put people in the state to get him elected. He was one of them. And he set up a training school. Keith Ellison, the radical Marxist Attorney General of Minnesota, was one of the instructors of that school. And that is the movement that Amy Klobuchar came out of, the Wellstone School and the Paul Wellstone movement. She was his protege. So all three of them come out of Democratic Socialists of America to one degree or another.
So have any of these candidates that are now running, have they changed their positions from their previous involvement in those various movements?
Well, not that I can see. You know, Amy Klobuchar was in Cuba a couple of years ago. She was endorsed recently by Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who was also part of the Wellstone training school. And she works with the left in Minnesota quite extensively. Yes, she's running a little bit more to the center, but she's running hard left. The others are running ultra left. That's how I would characterize it.
So do you have any thoughts about any Republicans that might be challenging Trump in the Republican primary? I think we've heard about the former governor of Massachusetts, Republican governor, who's going to be challenging Trump in the primaries. How does that play into helping these sort of left-wing socialist Democrats?
Look, I really cannot see, unless Trump is impeached or some evidence comes out that takes him out of office, I cannot see any Republican of any stature challenging him. I think this sort of the remnants of the Never Trump movement might try and search around to find somebody, but I don't think they'll have any chance of beating the president. You know, the country's polarized. The people are either very pro-Trump or very anti-Trump. And the Republican camp is not about to accept someone to upset the apple cart, so to speak.
Now, if you look at the latest polls from, I believe it was New Hampshire, but one of the earliest polls show that Bernie Sanders is leading against the other Democratic candidates in the primary race thus far. Now, obviously, they've got a little less than a year away before the first primaries and caucuses are held. But what does it say about the Democratic Party as a whole if Bernie Sanders is leading in this really tight race of candidates?
Look, I think he will lead for a short time, but I seriously don't think he'll keep the momentum. You know, Democratic Socialists of America haven't even committed to backing him yet, and they were the backbone of his campaign in the last election. They are divided as to whether to back him. He got $6 million in his first day, I think, because he has that core of supporters, that sort of 15% of Democrats who just think he's they love him like a chocolate. But, you know, last time when he stood against Hillary, he was the only dog in the race, effectively. So and Hillary was very unpopular, even amongst the Democrats. So he rode that to almost beating her. But now there's probably going to be 15 people in the race. Most of them are as far left-wing as he is, if not further so. So I think it's very, the problem with Bernie, and this is nothing he can do about this, he is too old and he's too white, and the Democratic playbook right now is to run candidates of color, to rerun the Rainbow Coalition strategy of the 80s, and to target the youth, female voters, and women of color, and candidate and people of color. He's going to run, but I think he'll flame out, and I think Kamala Harris will pick up his supporters.
All right, then. So it looks like Bernie Sanders then is yesterday's socialist, and tomorrow's socialist that's being pushed on us are these, individuals of color, like you mentioned, like a Kamala Harris, or maybe even an Alexandria Cortez in years to come. She could be a potential presidential candidate herself. Yeah. It's interesting because she was a supporter of Bernie, and she has not, when he ran in the last election, and she has not officially endorsed him either. And like you mentioned, the Democratic Socialists of America have not endorsed Bernie either. So perhaps they're content with all the candidates, or most of the candidates at least, that are running, and they're waiting to see who snatches the enough delegates to win the nomination. And if Kamala Harris is the one, they may feel comfortable enough to back her as the socialist torchbearer going into 2020 then.
Well, I think so. And look, a lot of the Democratic Socialists would like Bernie. A lot of the communists would like Bernie, but they don't seriously see that he can win. So they'll back him to build their numbers, to build their own support, because they went by backing Bernie Sanders last time. Democratic Socialists of America went from 5,000 members to 55,000 members, and they will try and build that again and use that. But they know Bernie's not going to win this. And you have you've got an alliance here, because in the middle of this, you got Our Revolution, which is basically a Bernie Sanders front. That's a Democratic Socialists of America front. That's got something like 200,000 members across the country, and they're active in the Democratic Party all over. So, but on the board of that organization, you've got 2 or 3 supporters like Ben Jealous, who are proteges of Steve Phillips, the real power broker in this race, and he controls Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is his protege. So what'll happen, I believe, it'll come down to Bernie and Kamala. Kamala will probably run with either Beto O'Rourke on the VP ticket, possibly Cory Booker, though I think he's sort of flamed out a bit, or Julian Castro, the socialist mayor former mayor from San Antonio, former head of HUD. So what I think will happen is that Our Revolution will transition Bernie supporters over to Kamala Harris when the time is right.
Okay, then. Well, thank you. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for being part of our program, Trevor. And those of you that are watching, we would hope that you would continue to like this channel, like this program, and subscribe to the New American YouTube channel page as well.